First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now. Appreciate you all joining us. We are streaming live on our website, on our apps, and of course, on our social media channels. So you can join in, leave your comments as we go throughout the show. And right now, I'm going to be playing an interview that I had with the CEO of Travel Oregon, Todd Davidson. So Todd joined the show to discuss a few different things, actually, that we're going to be covering in this. One of them is talking about economic numbers of how tourism in Oregon has increased, decreased over the last years. What are some pain points? What are some great things? So we're going to discuss that and how that's affecting some businesses in the state of Oregon. And we'll go from there to talk about a new campaign they have called Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon. And it talks about really having locals and businesses and different organizations help out tourists find out what to do. We go into it in more detail, so that's coming up. And finally, during this interview, we will talk about the eclipse that's coming up. I'm sure you've heard of it, the annular solar eclipse. It's going to be happening in October, and really great viewing is going to be happening over a big chunk of the state of Oregon. So we're going to talk about that, where to go, some different things that are happening for it. So a lot gets covered in this interview. So if you have questions, comments, make sure you drop those in if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. And if you're watching elsewhere, please enjoy the interview. Here we go. Here's Todd.
We are constantly tracking the overall health of the travel and tourism industry here in Oregon, across the state. We look at 7 distinct tourism regions when we're doing that work, and we find it to be a necessary part of what we do, especially when we're tracking the performance of our various campaigns and the work that we're doing overall. So we know that prior to the pandemic, back in 2019, 2020, travel and tourism was about a $12.8 billion industry for the state of Oregon. In 2022, having gone through the impacts of the pandemic, in 2022, we saw the travel and tourism industry recover to where it's become a $13.9 billion industry for the state of Oregon, employing about 117,000 Oregonians across the state. We do know that some of that increase is tied to inflation. Gas is more expensive now, food costs are more expensive now, but there's also been that increase in overall visitation that has been helping drive that visitor spending as well.
Which that's huge. So seeing a lot more people come into the state and actually spending money over this last period.
Yeah, and the recovery from COVID has not been a balanced recovery. Different regions of the state have recovered more quickly. Part of that is due to the visitor mix, meaning are they places that people go for leisure travel versus a business trip? Our international numbers are still below where they were in 2019. We used to see 12% of all visitor spending in Oregon came from international visitors. So 1 out of every $8 spent in Oregon came from an international visitor. That was only, rather than being 12% in 2022, it was only 5%.
Wow.
And of course, the Portland region is a region that benefits greatly from our international visitation, and we don't have all of our international flights back. And so therefore, we're not seeing that resurgence of all international travel to Oregon yet as well.
I am kind of curious about that, if you have any information on that, of maybe to dig in deeper of why it is that international tourists are not coming back to Oregon in quite the same numbers that they did before.
Well, the primary reasons in comparing 2019 to 2022 is realizing that, for example, our primary markets of China, Asia, Korea, the Asian markets are big markets for Oregon. They weren't open. They weren't open in 22. And so our European markets were open. Our European flights were returned. Many of our Canadian flights were back. Some of our flights from Mexico were back, but our Asian flights were not back. And the Asian countries, especially those that we're very dependent upon, Japan, Korea, and China, were not open for visitation yet. And when they did begin to open, the U.S. for roughly half of 2022 was still requiring people to have been vaccinated, having tested, et cetera. We didn't drop those regulations until May. And all of those things are going to suppress the desire to travel to the United States, let alone then subsequently come to Oregon.
Do you think that's something over the next maybe the next year? I know that's probably hard to completely guess what's going to be happening or try to prognosticate that, but do you think that that's something that's going to change as those countries open back up a little bit more?
We hire professional prognosticators for just
Yeah.
such an emergency, Greg. And we actually we're anticipating that it could be as early as 2024, if not probably 2025, that we see a full recovery in our international visitation. That's what we're anticipating at this time. Is a lot of that still depends on that return of the Asia flights, which again are being discussed but are not formally being sold yet.
Well, looking at tourism here in Oregon, whether it's international or even domestic, there is a new campaign that launched called Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon, and I wondered if you could explain that to us and talk about what the goals are of that.
The beauty of this campaign is realizing that the strategy behind it was born out of what we were hearing from the visitors themselves. Visitors were telling us that they had a deep desire to travel to Oregon, but they had little knowledge of all the places that they could go and exactly how to go about enjoying this state, what it is they would be able to do here, the activities they could partake in, whether it's whitewater rafting, wine tasting, surfing, hiking, you name it. Those kinds of activities that they're interested in. Where do they go? How do they go about doing it? So they know it's here. They know that Oregon's beautiful and a great place for these things. But being able to access that was what we wanted to tap into. So we came up with this idea of traveling to Oregon with Travel Oregon. The idea was travel Oregon with a guide. Travel Oregon with somebody who can share that in-depth information with you and help you better understand, appreciate, and kind of become a little more embedded in this Oregon vacation experience that you're seeking here. And that is best done with a guide. They know the secret places. They also would know the rules and regulations that you want to be mindful of. Maybe there's a certain restriction that might be in place because it's wildfire season. All these good reasons for traveling Oregon with a guide. That's what makes up Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon.
Well, I think that is something that anybody here in Oregon has certainly experienced, whether you've been here a long time or whether you've just moved here, is when everybody comes to visit is, what do I do? Where do I go? Yeah. They may know some general things. There's mountains, there's a beach, there's a city, but then beyond that, really digging into that, it does seem to end up being that it's somebody local that's giving that information. So how do you tie that in to people who don't have a direct connection, to somebody who lives in Oregon? They show up, how do they find this out?
It's a beautiful point, Greg. One of the things we need to understand is that these guides can come in many forms. It might be hiring a commercial guide, that can take you fly fishing, can take you on a tour of the wine country, can help you explore the art galleries and the museums of the city. We have a plethora of guides that are offering a variety of different services and experiences here in Oregon for visitors to be able to tap into and enrich their experience. But that's not in everybody's budget. And we understand that. Guides can also come in the form of our Welcome Center staff. They could come in the form of a podcast host, a newspaper or magazine article. One of our local papers that's running us, stories on things to see and do in Oregon and to be able to experience while you're here. Tapping into that as a guide as well. So the guide could be literal, or it could obviously be figurative. It could be a commercial guide, or it could be a guided experience with a park ranger who knows the night skies of Central Oregon, that Welcome Center volunteer who really intimately understands the wine industry and the wine country and where you want to go for a particular taste or a particular meal or whatever that may be, and help guide that experience as well. So one of the ways we're tying people back into these guides is through our website. There's a list of guides, there's a list of trip ideas and itineraries, all available for folks on traveloregon.com.
And I'm taking a look here at part of the campaign. I believe this is part of it here with these travel guides as well. You've got, I'm not sure what the name is there.
Our that's Kayak Yak. The previous one was Sustainable. Each of our guides has a sidekick. This is Rosa. Rosa's very knowledgeable about wine and culinary. This is Telephone Paul. Telephone Paul is very knowledgeable about festivals and events and concerts. This is Boots. I bet you can already imagine what he's knowledgeable about. So we've got quite a collection of sidekicks to accompany our guides through your Oregon experience.
And this is somebody anybody can go on there and take a look at, and then tailor that experience to something that they're really interested in.
that is really at the heart of all this. Our visitors are looking for that personalized experience, and those guides can deliver that for them. So, and they can begin planning that personalized Oregon experience on traveloregon.com.
And you mentioned that there's actually some connections on there to, those local people, to those guides, to whether it's, somebody who can guide rafting or whatever that experience is. So are there local businesses that are tied in with this that they can then get in contact with?
Yeah, this is all about local businesses. In fact, local businesses throughout the state of Oregon that can take you out and depending on what your interest is and in the experiences that you're looking for, we have those guides in a directory for you to be able to access and begin planning your trip that way. Get in contact with those guides and start planning that adventure.
Nice. I mean, that would be something good for whether you're visiting the state or even if you're just a local, say going to, Southeast Oregon, and I don't know exactly where to go there, someplace different in the state. So.
A lot of folks don't realize that roughly 40% of the visitor activity in the state of Oregon, when you look at all that visitor spending, we mentioned the $13.9 billion earlier, that's Oregonians. That's us getting out, enjoying our home state because we love it here. We love the beauty of it, and there's places that we're still trying to get out and discover. And so, again, traveloregon.com is for you as well.
Well, another big event that's going to be happening in October is the eclipse, the annular eclipse that's going to be taking place. And I know I've heard from people that are traveling to Oregon for that because we've got the path going right through there. But tell us about what people can expect for that and where they can go and how they can get involved with that.
As a guy who was here in 2017 when we had the total eclipse and thought he was going to have one eclipse in his lifetime, it was one of those bucket list things. Then to find out in 2023, we're going to get the annular eclipse with this amazing ring of fire. And again, Oregon gets to be first at the table again because it's going to be the Oregon coast where it's going to be seen first, roughly between Glen Eden Beach and in the south coast, that path of annularity. Oregon's going to have some great viewing opportunities for sure. You look at the Oregon coast, you look at that swath across southern Oregon into eastern and parts of south central Oregon. There are festivals that are being planned down in Klamath County. They've got the Eclipse Fest that they're planning. It's going to be a multi-day festival with concerts and food and camping and the like. And they're in that Klamath County area. So think Crater Lake, think the Eclipse Fest, think, that part of the state of Oregon and where you might be. They will have the longest duration for that ring of fire, that annularity, that eclipse of annularity right there. Because they're right in that zone. So that whole southeastern Oregon, southern Oregon component, south coast, Glen Eden Beach South, great viewing opportunities for the eclipse.
Which is a wide swath, as you mentioned, going across the state to watch the southern part of the state right there, but ending up at the coast, or starting at the coast rather. Yeah, that would be an amazing place to watch. So for people who are coming in, Oregonians, whether you're from the Northwest, whether you're from beyond that and you're watching this, what would you recommend people do in order to find a good place to, or a place to stay? I know it's a little bit late, but I'm sure there's still some things out there.
Yeah, it's funny, Greg, but the first thing I was going to say is plan ahead. So that means now. So if you're viewing this now, you can go to traveloregon.com. You can also look up lodging listings on there, and you can look through these areas. You can find information on the annular eclipse as well. But there are lodging listings on there also. But plan now if you want to make it an overnight stay. There's also opportunities for camping, of course, state park camping, Forest Service camping, could be dispersed camping on BLM. And as quickly as I mentioned the camping, the thing I want to bring up is this is still going to be wildfire season. So I got to encourage people to be really careful out there. Be careful with their fires, if they're permitted at all. Be careful with their camp stoves, again, if they're permitted at all. Be careful about where you park your vehicle. If you're parking off the side of the road and it's an area with dry grass, just be really careful out there because the wildfire season is not going to be over yet on October 14th. So planning ahead, being careful about wildfire, being responsible, realizing you're a guest in these communities and make those connections with the locals. They're going to be eager to host folks because they understand the value of the travel and tourism industry, and they're going to be good hosts when you're there as well.
There you go. Spend some money locally.
Absolutely.
Well, Todd, anything else that you want to let people know about?
Greg, this has been terrific, and I we just encourage people to get onto traveloregon.com. One thing we know about Oregon is that it really is a tremendous year-round destination. One of the changes we're making with this Travel Oregon with Travel Oregon campaign is the fact that it's what we call an always-on campaign. So you will see us promoting in some way, shape, or form. It could be broadcast, it could be social. There obviously the media is a multi-channeled beast these days. So, but there's opportunities for us to be always on with our messaging, encouraging Oregonians and visitors to come and experience what this state has to offer year round. And certainly want to start by encouraging Oregonians to get out there and experience Oregon at a time of year they might normally not, and get to know that aspect of Oregon's personality as well, because she's pretty doggone amazing. She's incredibly diverse and worthy of a visit.
Well, Todd, thank you very much, as always, for joining me here on Fox 12 Now.
My pleasure, Greg. Thanks for having me.
All right, there we go. Obviously, that was recorded yesterday. I'm wearing the blue shirt today, black shirt yesterday. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. And so Travel Oregon, clearly with a lot happening there. I'm sure a lot of you are making plans to go see the eclipse. Coming up here on the show, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back at 2 p.m. I've got John Horvick from DHM Research. And here's what we're going to be talking about, some polling data that they have collected. So they do really big polls, surveying all kinds of people from Oregon, all kinds of demographics, all kinds of political leanings, to gather an idea of what Oregonians think about certain topics. We're going to be discussing what they feel is the most important thing happening in the state of Oregon. We're going to be discussing opinions on Governor Kotek, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump. So we have the data on that, the polling data from that. How are people feeling about all three of them, political leanings in general, and we're going to be discussing the housing crisis. So a lot that's happening, and these are all going to be, again, data-based polls from actual Oregonians, letting their opinions be known. You can let your opinion be known if you are watching live on Facebook or YouTube. So we'll be back on here in just a few minutes if you're watching live, 2 p.m. Pacific. If you're watching afterward, you can always watch all of our segments on the Fox 12 Oregon YouTube channel, on our app, or, of course, our website. So thanks for joining us. I'll be speaking to you soon. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.